shall we briefly look at some of the men working on this building project to learn a little about their work and see the surroundings and conditions in which they're employed. In recent years, mechanical equipment has taken over much of the manual work in building. The mechanical excavator bites into the heavy clay soil with speed and ease. Closely following the guidelines set out by the surveyor, the highly skilled excavator driver cuts trenches with military precision. Over 1.5 million men are employed in building, and about half of these are skilled. The unskilled workers are broadly classified as builders' labourers. This title ranges from those engaged in demolition work, excavating and concreting, to those serving skilled workers like this hod carrier. The hod carrier gets his name from the square container in which he carries either bricks or mortar. This is heavy work, and although classed as unskilled, it calls for speed, agility, and a certain knack. This worker is serving a number of bricklayers, mixing and supplying their mortar and distributing their bricks along the line of work. Hod carriers and bricklayers sometimes join forces and offer their services to an employer as a team, for an experienced hod carrier quickly learns the ways of his bricklayers and can therefore serve them with great speed and efficiency, a valuable asset, particularly when the workers are employed on piece rates. When the walls have been set out, a team of bricklayers, in this case including an apprentice, start work. Speedy but careful craftsmen laying brick upon brick, undertaking one of the many jobs in the building industry which can make or mar the architect's dreams. What then is a bricklayer? He is a man who works to a plan. He'll have a good knowledge of practical geometry, he can measure accurately, he has an inherent instinct for good line, he'll be a robust, healthy individual who gets on well with his fellows, he'll have a good sense of balance, as he may often be required to work at heights. He will have a sound knowledge of the building and construction industry. He should be mobile and certainly must be versatile. Craftsman closely connected with the bricklayer is the carpenter. The carpenter's work can be broadly divided into two stages, called first and second fixing. This carpenter is engaged on first fixing, which is perhaps his most strenuous work. Putting up roof timbers or laying floor joists often involves handling large pieces of timber and calls for considerable strength and a good sense of balance. The carpenter must be able to understand architects' drawings in order to measure off timbers and fix the positions of woodwork. For a roof of complicated design, this may be a difficult job, because where sloping sections meet, the angle to which the end of each beam must be cut varies in different parts of the roof. The carpenter must have some knowledge of geometry to work out such problems. This carpenter is spreading floor joists in preparation for the bricklayers to construct the upper story of this house. The carpenter, particularly when first fixing, is exposed to all weather conditions. He'll be required to climb ladders and work at heights, and like all other building trade workers, will frequently be called upon to work in undeveloped areas where travelling facilities may be limited. These gas fitters are employed by a firm of subcontractors and not by the main contractor. They are in fact employed by the local gas board. It's their work to install and connect domestic gas appliances and equipment. They cut to length and bend metal piping and make joints using screw connectors. Later, they'll fit the meters and connect the supply. A great deal of building work is undertaken by subcontractors. These firms undertake a portion of the work for a negotiated price, They employ their own labor and will notify their own vacancies direct to the employment exchange. Another subcontractor on this site is undertaking the asphalt work. The glowing fire and the familiar smell of bubbling mastic asphalt is known to us all. The potman is drawing off the mastic material, which must be quickly passed to the craftsman for spreading. The potman prepares and heats the asphalt, sometimes adding other materials according to a formula. He may control a small auxiliary engine which works a mixing mechanism. Asphalting is an effective method of waterproofing, and on these houses the flat roofs and gutters are first lined with felt and later spread with hot mastic asphalt applied in 2 coats. The work requires great speed and considerable strength, particularly in the arms and shoulders. The asphalt spreader is on his knees for long periods. This is highly skilled work. The asphalter is one of the last remaining craftsmen to make his own tools, and these craftsmen are proud of their spreaders with which they so skillfully cover these roofs. The building craftsman still retains his traditional status and responsibility. He is required to display individual manual dexterity with his tools in constantly changing fashions, materials, and finishes. In most of his work, he makes decisions and does not perform a repetitive operation which has been set out by a more highly paid worker. The craftsman may be promoted to charge hand and to foreman. Asphalters not only work on roofs, but are also engaged in tanking, which is covering walls to keep water either in or out. Much building work is performed out of doors, so that a liking for open-air work and physical fitness is demanded from a high proportion of those engaged in the industry. Not all building workers are employed out of doors. In fact, a trade which is mainly indoor is that of electrician. Electricians are employed in the large number of contracting firms which install electrical wiring and equipment in buildings of all kinds. 3 pairs of electricians are working on this site. This means there are 3 skilled electricians working with 3 electricians' mates, or in this case 3 apprentices. For many installations, the electrician has to run the wiring through a protective metal tube. Each length of conduit, as the tube is called, has to be cut accurately, and it may have to be bent to fit curves or corners. Almost all electricians are apprentice-trained, and the bias of their training depends upon the needs of their employer. A contracting electrician must be mobile, as his work will take him anywhere. He must be capable of working at heights. He must be agile and patient, as he may have to work in uncomfortable and awkward positions. Color blindness could be a serious handicap, as most of the cables are identified by the color of their covering. This cable has a tough covering and can be clipped to the wall for subsequent plastering in or looped through holes drilled in the floor joists. Plastering is another job on this site undertaken by subcontractors. and a gang of workers are skimming their way from house to house, leaving behind them rooms which start to look like the rooms we know. The first step in plastering is to provide a good hold or key, and the plasterer will make his own surface with plaster board. The ceilings are covered in this way, and great skill is required to manipulate these large sheets of plasterboard. The ceilings and walls are treated in different ways. The joints in the boarded ceilings will first be covered with strips of scrim, a loosely woven material which prevents cracks appearing where the boards meet. The craftsman then skims a thin layer of plaster over the whole of the ceilings. The plaster is made up or gauged by the plasterer's labourer, but each craftsman must know exactly what mix to use for each job and must be able to give instructions about preparing it. The mixture is made up to a thick cream, and this is spread evenly using a metal trowel. The surface is finished off with a fine spray of water flicked on with a brush and the face well troweled to form a hard surface. Plasterboard is also sometimes used for wall covering when it's fixed direct to the structural material with spots of plaster. In these houses, however, the walls were finished using the traditional method. First, a rendering coat is applied, providing an even, firm foundation. With an almost artistic ability, the plasterer scoops the rendering from his hawk, spreading it evenly on the wall. How easy it looks, and how difficult it really is. The plasterer may work either under cover or in the open air, and needs to possess reasonably good physique and to be free from physical disabilities which would impair his ability to undertake continuous stooping, reaching, lifting, pulling and pushing. The plasterer should have average intelligence, manual dexterity, initiative, reliability and speed. Most of the plumber's work is done with copper tube, and using a bending machine, the craftsman will form the pipe to closely follow the lines of the walls. It's convenient to regard plumbing in the building industry under two headings. The first is concerned mainly with fitting pipe systems for cold and hot water supply and conveyance of waste from WCs, sinks, wash basins, baths, etc. to the outside of the building. The other is concerned with the prevention of water or moisture from entering a building at junctions between walls and roof and fixing rainwater pipes which discharge into the drainage system. In simple terms, the plumber takes water to the building, takes wastewater from the building and keeps unwanted water out of the building. This he accomplishes by the erection of a system of pipework in materials specified by the architect and by laying lead, zinc or other materials as a roof covering. New materials, particularly plastics, are increasingly finding their way into the building industry. The rate of change is beginning to speed up in an industry known to take up to 20 years to accept a new idea, and all craftsmen are called upon to handle new materials and systems. Industrialized building could change the whole concept of the industry. A system where whole sections of houses or flats are factory made, sometimes with doors and other fixtures fitted before the components leave the factory. Industrialized building would drastically reduce the second fixing, where the carpenters put the finishing touches to the interior. Although on this site traditional methods are being used, the second fixing is minimized by close liaison with the joinery manufacturer. Second fixing requires special accuracy and great patience. Fitting cupboards, skirting boards and doors, etc. is work for a man possessing one of the traditional building skills. As the work progresses, it becomes more complex to schedule the finishing trades. The electricians return to install their fittings and to ensure that the whole installation is connected efficiently and correctly. They use special measuring instruments and other apparatus to carry out these tests. With the completion date in sight, there's still much to be done outside and around the buildings. Roads to be completed, pavements laid, fences erected, street lighting installed, and even lawns and trees to be planted. Here the architects have designed pedways where traffic will be excluded and pedestrians free to walk unimpeded. The paviors are engaged cutting and shaping curb and paving stones. This is heavy work demanding the ability to lift considerable weights. The pavior, or street mason, is one of the many crafts taught in our government training centres. Although the majority of paviors are employed by local authorities, there are still occasional openings with large building firms and with contractors who specialize in this branch of the industry. A progress chart in the contracts manager's office shows that 10 of these dwellings are to be handed over to the local authority next week. The painters are the last trade in a long line of craftsmen who've contributed to maintaining this schedule. The painter's skill lies chiefly in his training and experience in the use of various types of material which is called upon to apply to many kinds of different surfaces. He is required to work quickly and tidily, frequently at heights and sometimes in cradles suspended from the outside of buildings. The fully skilled all-round painter and decorator calls for men of integrity with a deftness in the use of tools, accuracy, patience, considerable artistic ability, and colour sense. Another 10 houses, a contribution to the seemingly insatiable demand for not only houses, but all constructional work which arises from plans for large-scale expansion and modernization. The construction industries will need to increase output by about 50% over the next decade. This must be achieved, in the main, by improvements in productivity, as any great increase in labor resources to meet these demands is unlikely. Our contribution to productivity is by placing workers efficiently and quickly in the jobs where they're likely to use their skills to the best advantage. In your job, you meet the building worker. It is your responsibility to place him in the right work in the shortest possible time, thereby making a direct contribution to greater productivity.